Welcome back to the A Dresden Quilt Along. I'm so happy you are here. If this is the first time you're hearing about this quilt along and you're not signed up yet or receiving the quilt along emails every Wednesday, there's a link right below this video you can sign up at, and that will give you access to the schedule, the tips and tricks, and the prizes. So get signed up right below. We're starting chapter 3 today. So last chapter, which was 2 weeks ago, I showed you how to make a block. And I have so enjoyed seeing your blocks over on Instagram. They have been so pretty. I could just look at Dresden blocks all day. I've chatted with a few of you, and that was a lot of fun too. This chapter, chapter 3, we are going to change it up just a little bit. We're still making 6 blocks, and they're all still going to be made the exact same way. But I'm going to show you some methods of batch sewing, basically, for breaking all the blocks down, working on each task within each block all at once. So all 6 blocks would end up finished at the exact same time. This is particularly helpful when you are somebody who does not have as much time. So if you are finding yourself crunched to time, if you're struggling to get all 6 blocks done in 2 weeks, this might be more suited for you. Now, if you're a 1 block at a time quilter, more power to you. Do it that way. I just wanted to, have different ways of getting things done for those of you who are in a slow period of your life and those who are in a fast period of your life. So we all go through different seasons. All right, so let's start this efficiency method, and I'll tell you about prizes at the end. Okay, we are ready to go with this batch sewing. And what I've got going on here is I have my stack of squares for my background blocks. So there's enough for 6 blocks of these, 24 squares. And then I have 6 stacks. Each stack represents a Dresden plate, 20 blades in each stack, 10 of each colorway. So I know you know that, but there it is again if you're just now jumping in. We're going to do this in batches, and this batch sewing is way more efficient, but it also speeds the whole process up. So if you are somebody who is short on time, this is going to be really, really helpful for you. Also, I feel like if you don't like to jump from task to task, this is a great way to get blocks done. If you want to make blocks one at a time like we did last week, go for it. I'm not trying to push this here on you. I just wanted to show multiple ways of getting things done, because we all go through different periods in our life. Like sometimes you have all the time in the world, sometimes you're crunched for time, right? So just a different way of doing it. We're going to do the same routine that we did last week. We're just doing more pieces at a time. This is particularly helpful for the Dresden plates themselves, but mostly for top stitching, not having to change that thread back and forth. So yeah, so let's jump in and grab our background squares and take them to the sewing machine. All right, so we are piecing our background squares, and we're going to chain piece all of these. Now you kind of saw me do that even with the individual blocks last week, but here it is again. And if you've never chain pieced before, this is a huge time saver. When I first started quilting, I did not know about chain piecing, and I sat there and just cut the thread between every single piece of patchwork that I sewed. So I felt really, really, I don't want to say dumb, because you just don't know these things, but I felt like I had wasted this huge amount of time that I could have used. I could have made more quilts. And for me, making more quilts is kind of the whole shebang. I want to be doing this every day, and I want lots of quilts made. So I'm going to run through these, but it's, just like last week, we're just sewing all of these into pairs for rows 1 and row 2. And then I'm going to show you a couple of ways I keep things straight at the pressing mat. So let me get these done, and then I'll pop back on here. All right, I've got all 6
So there should be 12 sections that I've sewn together here. So same thing, we just sit here and flip them. And the way I paired them up is I just kind of paired my busies up with some of my less busy. You don't have to do that. I kind of like, you know, the contrast of busy and light and not busy. So I've kind of paired them up that way without any other thought to it. All right, let's go to the pressing mat. So, all right, so now we are going to just set all of these seams really quickly. So let me run through these. And then one thing I like to do when I'm doing, you know, rows 1 and rows 2 is just kind of do this little number right here. Just split them out so I know that I've got 2 separate stacks. And I'm going to show you why in just a minute. All right, so we're going to put 1 stack away. The other stack, I'm going to push the seams this way. And one thing I want you to notice, and this may not be you, and if that's not you, then you're going to be doing this a little bit different from me, but I like to make sure that the prints are all in the right direction. So this print, neither one of these actually matter, but for the sake of what I'm doing right here, these are going to be in the right direction, and then I just press this, and I want to make sure that that's the case for all the other ones too. So, and what this does is this makes sure that all of my seams are going in opposing directions on both of the rows without me having to put that much thought into it. And it also gets all of my directional prints going in the right direction, which I know that's not important to everybody, but it usually is important to me. And what I mean by directional, just in case it's the first time you've heard of it, the butterfly is going in this direction. I'm not worried about these other butterflies because they're cut, but this one kind of matters to me. A lot of these prints I've used for my background, it doesn't really matter what direction they go in. But a lot of times it does, so I kind of keep this same routine going. All right, I'm going to put this stack out of the way, and I'm going to grab this stack. And for this stack, I want to make sure that everything is upside down direction. So, see the butterfly is going this way. I'm still going to press in this direction, but when I put these 2 stacks together for row 1, row 2, this one will be like this, and it'll make all of those seams in the opposite directions, which is exactly what we need to nest. This actually is a directional print, and it's supposed to go like this. So for that reason, I'm turning it upside down to press it. Here's another directional, so it's upside down as well. I do have a few in here. This one, the flower, I'm making sure the flowers are upside down on this second stack. All right, so now I'll take this whole row and then just flip it over like this. And then I'll bring this row back and have it like this. And this is how I always do when I'm working on 4 patches, you know, row 1 and row 2. So that I can, when I put these together, this seam is going this way and this seam is going this way. And they're all in the same direction. So they all, you know, are exactly the way I want them. And then we do the same thing where we pin that middle seam. And we're being particular about it because I want that, you know, seam to line up. If you don't care, that's okay. Don't care on my account. And then I'll make a little stack of both of these, all right? And I'm trying to make sure, you know, that I always put this row on my bottom and this one on my top. And the reason I'm doing that is because when we sew all of our blocks together, they'll all match up and the seams will all be in the right place. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on that, making sure I do that. If you don't end up doing that just so, that's okay. You can still make that work without a problem, but I just kind of try to be mindful of it so that I'll have an easier time when we sew all our blocks together. I also am trying to be mindful that I I know this really doesn't matter, but like I said, I can be very, very particular. I want to make sure that whatever's in here on this row is not down here, so I don't use my fabrics that close to each other in the quilt. Again, doesn't matter. I just have all these little particulars that I like to do. When you've been quilting for so a long time, that you get stuck in your little ways. And I try to be more open, but some things I continue to stay stuck, and fabrics touching is one of those things. I'm gonna finish this up and then we'll sew them all together. All right, I've got all 6 blocks here, set in pairs, pinned in place, and we're gonna chain piece all of these, and we're gonna use our 1/4 inch seam. If the term 1/4 inch seam is new to you, it just means that this right here, this little bit up past your seam, past where you stitched, it just means that it measures a 1/4 inch. And the reason you want things to measure the 1/4 inch is so everything will fit together correctly. If you have struggled with things not coming out the right sizes, the majority of the time your problem is that you're not sewing with a 1/4 inch seam, and just changing that tiny little thing about your sewing will, you know, make the whole process way less frustrating if you're getting frustrated. I actually have a whole class about precision over at Quilt Class, and I'll link to that just in case it's something you might need. So I'll finish these up and we'll press them together. All right, so we got them all sewn, and we're gonna sit here, set all of our seams. And this is the same thing, again, that we did during chapter 2, but we're just doing more at a time. And this means that you are jumping from task to task a little bit less. I make a lot of my quilts this way. Like if I'm making sawtooth stars and I have, you know, a whole bunch of blocks, I'll make all the flying geese and the sawtooth stars at once instead of making, you know, one block here and one block there. It just kind of saves me a lot of time, and it makes it able for me to get, you know, more quilts done since that seems to be a priority for me. All right, so we're just opening these seams, we're pressing them, and we're giving them just a little bit of starch or pressing spray. I keep calling it starch, and I know I need to call it pressing spray. I'm gonna finish these blocks on my own, and then we can move on to our blades. Okay, so we have our background blocks complete. I'm just going to move these out of my way, and I have my Dresden plates in stacks. And what I'm gonna do is to just put them all in one single stack like this. So I'm gonna do that. Uh-oh. And then I'm gonna take them all to the sewing machine so that we can, you know, batch all these together as well. So let's go to the sewing machine. All right, so if you wanna keep these in their individual stacks, you could have done that too. However you wanna do it is fine. Here we go. We're gonna sew these all together, chain piece style. And I'm using my 1/4 inch seam, and I wanted to give you a look at what that looks like just in case you're new to it. Let me just grab the camera here. And what it means is that here's my 1/4 inch line on my needle plate. I'm keeping my seam on the inside of that line. So not on it and not on any other side of it. I'm keeping it right there in front of it. And that is going to make sure that all of my Dresden plates have the correct seam allowance and they come out the right size and all that good stuff. Doing that, or just being mindful of that little tiny thing, can actually save you so much frustration later on down the road. And with Dresden plates, they're a little bit forgiving, so we don't have to just be like super on top of it, whereas some blocks or some units you make, like our 4 patches, if I hadn't have been mindful of those seam allowances, I could end up with something that does not measure 12.5, and I need it to measure 12.5 so that the other 12.5 inch blocks will fit together properly. So just you know, watching out for that, like I said, being mindful of it, really can help you down the road. And if you get something a 1/2 inch off, that's a major issue down the road when you start sewing your blocks together. When I say sewing blocks together, I mean like sewing one block to another block. Things won't fit. You'll have to either remake it, or you'll have to fudge your seam allowances, and that will, you know, weaken your quilt. So just sew everything with a 1/4 inch unless told otherwise. You will be so happy you did when your blocks fit together. If you're not having any trouble with your blocks fitting together, obviously you can ignore that because you're probably already doing it. I'm going to sit here and do this until I have, how many is this? 6 times 20, 120 all sewn together.
Right. This is what all these blades look like together. There's just tons of them. So I've gone and gotten myself a bin, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sit here and put them all in the bin as I cut them free, just like this. And I would encourage you to put them in something, a tray, a basket, or something, because doing it this way, I mean, you have, like I said, 120 of these, and you don't want to lose one. So I like to have a bin when I'm doing this many. All right, so let me get these all free of each other, and we'll go and get them turned right side out. Okay, and normally I like to take this to the sofa in the evenings and do that there. Do this there because this just kind of takes a while, and it's something you can do very absent-mindedly. So I don't like to use up, you know, the little time I have in my sewing room. I don't like to use it up for things like this. I like to save it for when I'm just, you know, chilling out in the evenings. That's just me, though. You know, you do it when you want to do it. It's a really good activity to do sitting down. You don't necessarily have to stand up to do this. So, up to you, though. I'm going to get all these turned right sides out, and then I'll use my little pointer tool and get them all with their points out. All right, so I have them all in right sides out, and then we're just going to do our little get those points out task, and then we'll be ready to press after we get done. Just, I like to have them all out and then put them all back in, just to keep it organized a bit. Make sure that none of them get left, you know, undone. But same thing as last week, just more of them. So I'm going to finish this up, and then we'll start pressing them. Okay, I am ready to press. And I'm going to do this exactly the way I showed you last time. I may not be able to get all 120 on here at once, but I'm going to get as many as I can. And I thought that while I was doing this, I would talk to you about the wool mat, because I had some questions about it last week. So I know a lot of you are using ironing boards, and I probably used an ironing board for 10 years of my quilting. They get wobbly, or at least the ones that are made today are wobbly. My grandmother had one that was just like a table sitting there. But these ironing boards that I kept buying were just, you know, wobbly, horrible ironing boards. And I would buy these really expensive irons, and they would fall off and end up, you know, leaking or not working anymore. So when the first time I saw one of these wool mats, and it is made out of, you know, real wool, I, you know, jumped at the opportunity to try one and use it. And I put it on just a regular table. And what I like about it
is it heats, the wool gets hot and stays hot. So, I mean, I can feel it's just warm. They say that it like presses from both sides of your piece and, you know, resulting in flatter seams. And I'm always all about, you know, flattest blocks, units, seams I can possibly get. So that was like a no-brainer for me to try it. I tried it and I loved it. I do have something protecting my table up under this mat. It's just an old tablecloth, but it's there. I think it's vinyl on one side and flannel on the opposite side, and it protects my table from the heat and from the steam that I'm always using. So I have a very detailed look at all that, so I'll link to that in the links right below this video if you are interested in seeing or learning more about my pressing setup. All right, I've got a few of these done. So what I'm going to do now is kind of sort them as I go. So I'm putting, you know, like fabric with like fabric. And they're a little hot, but we'll just do the best we can. So that's the way I'm going to do mine. You know, you do yours however you see fit. I'm going to finish all this pressing up on my own time because I know you know how to do it already. And I'll see you when I get it all done and we can start making our plates together. All right, so they're all pressed, ready to go. And I want to get them back sorted into their, you know, this equals one plate. So I'm going to take a minute and do that. And I'm going to try to remember what everything was. If I get something wrong, that's fine. You know, most of the fabrics are going to get, you know, together anyway. So I will, I'm also kind of looking at my other Dresden plates that we finished last chapter. And I just, you know, I kind of don't want two plates to be exactly the same. So I'm kind of mixing them all up so that each plate is unique. Of course, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. It's just something that I thought would be, you know, fun to do. Let's try, I think I did that last week, so I think I'll do this week. All right, so there we go. So let's take this all to the sewing machine. All right, so I'm gonna sew my plates together the same way I showed you last week. I am not going to completely batch this entire in all 6 plates at once because I've finally reordered these and I don't want to get them undone again. So I'm just gonna sew all of these at one session though. So I'll sit at my sewing machine until I have all the plates completed. But again, once I get these sewn into pairs, I'll continue working with this set. So I'll get all of those done and then we'll press them all together. All right, got them all sewn. And we're gonna press these just one at a time, just the way we did last week. And if you want to with this batch sewing, it makes it a little bit easier to break it up into, you know, task per day. So one day you might press them all, one day you might sew them all, that type of thing. One day you might top stitch them all. So I'm gonna get all of these pressed and then we'll get them, then I'll go ahead and get them all pinned and then we'll move on to top stitching. All right, I have swapped to my Microquilter thread and I've increased my stitch length just a smidgen and I'm ready to start going on top stitching all of these plates. And there's not going to be any difference between, you know, last chapter and today. It'll be the exact same thing, doing it the exact same way. It's just that this week I have all of my plates here ready to go. So that was what I was talking about earlier. You won't have to, if you make one block at a time, you won't have to keep swapping that thread or forgetting to swap the thread or that stitch length. So that's one of the reasons I like to batch sew better. But anyway, I will finish getting all of these top stitch, and then we'll start our centers together. All right, I have all 6 of my blocks top stitched now, and we'll just kind of run the iron over them a little bit. This will relieve, you know, any tension issues and just make them really crisp. So let me do that, and then we'll start the centers. All right, I've gone ahead and cut out all of the flowers I wanted, and I've pulled the backing off. And again, I just want to remind you to watch out for some of these. If you cut all the way in, cut all that background off, cut the flower, you might be left with a piece that doesn't cover. So just kind of, what I've been doing is I've been holding my finger at the narrowest points on both sides, and then seeing if I could fit it without background. And when I can't, I leave the background on there. So that's what I've been doing anyway. So now I just kind of want to decide what is gonna go on what plate. And I also wanna make sure that I've got my flower. Some of them matter, like, you know, the rose couldn't go like that. So some of them, the direction matters, and some of them doesn't. And I just wanna make sure that this is in line with the background stuff. So it is. So now I can just press and then get these done this way. And I kind of like it this way because I can, you know, audition which one looks better. I had a lot of these this week that I felt needed background. Trying to figure out what way is best for that flower. I think like that. So this is what I'm doing. It's still kind of one at a time, but we're doing, 6 at once though, even though it's still a lot of it is one at a time. Oh, I like this one. Or is it? Sometimes it's hard to tell. That's pretty. When I use the circle centers that are just, plain circles, I do a better job of making sure that I've got everything lined up. Whereas on this one, I feel a little bit more that I can take some liberty with these Dresden Flower Centers, or I can take some liberty, and if they're a little bit off-centered, I don't feel like it matters as much because, they're not perfectly round. So, as always, do this however you please with the decisions you make. I'm going to finish these up, and then I'll show you all of my blocks. All right, and then here's a quick look at this week's blocks, or this chapter's blocks. A lot more brown today. All right, and I'm gonna put them on the wall with last chapter's blocks. All right, and then here is a look at all of my blocks together on the design wall. Let me step back. Oh, let me get that. So I think it's shaping up to be pretty fun. And I do think when I get those spacer blocks in between some of these, I think it will look, even better. I just really like the spacer blocks too, which we will get into next. Okay, I hope you enjoyed seeing that method. That is kind of the way on the majority of quilts I usually work. It just kind of helps me get done a little quicker, and it also helps me focus on one single task at a time. Sometimes, especially when you're new to a certain skill, you'll learn something and then it's just easier to do that for all of your blocks versus one block at a time. That way you don't forget those tiny little tips and tricks that help you. Okay, so let's talk about prizes. I'm going to give away another set of Jolly Basics, this time in the fat quarter size. $60 value. It's Ruby Star, they're Jolly Basics, all Christmassy fabric. Get these out while we're still in the holiday season. So that, all the details for how to win and all that is in those emails that I send out every Wednesday.
All right, so that's it. Don't forget to post your progress on Instagram using the hashtag #ADresdenQAL, and that way we can connect and see what you're working on, and you can see other people making Dresden quilts and things like that. Thank you for watching. I will see you next week.